A child's reality is not shaped by what they are given, but by what is withheld. Not by words spoken, but by the deafening, formative silence that follows. For the child who grows inside that quiet, the silence ceases to be a sound. It becomes the echo chamber of their being, the very architecture of their self. There is a devastating truth about these children. They become adults who enter any room and instinctively calculate the minimum space they are allowed to occupy. In relationships, they whisper, "Am I too much? Or am I still not enough?" When they succeed, they don't celebrate, they brace. They wait for their victory to be overlooked or credited to luck, as if their own invisibility is a basic law of physics. This isn't mere shyness, it's because the foundation of their self was poured and set in the quiet. Psychologists call it an internalized neglect schema. The brain, over thousands of corrosive moments, wires itself to expect disregard as its due, to anticipate dismissal as the universe's default, to equate having a need with being a burden. A child ignored enough times learns, heartbreakingly, not to ask. They perform silent surgery on their own desires, learning that human cravings for love or understanding are somehow inappropriate. Have you ever seen it? The child at a gathering, a small hand on a parent's arm, waiting for a presence to be registered. Or on the playground, sitting alone on the edge of the swings, not crying, just watching, already internalizing the role of spectator in their own life. The child doesn't make a scene. They perform the perfect, quiet retreat. On the surface, it looks peaceful, but inside their mind, something permanent is breaking. For a child, being ignored is a seismic event in their identity. It feels like a deep, hairline fracture in the bedrock of who they are. The central paradox is that this neglect doesn't wear the mask of cruelty. It's often an unintentional absence. It's the question that hangs unanswered.
The lack of eye contact when they burst in with news, the forgotten accomplishment. The parent who is physically present but emotionally miles away, lost in a foam, in exhaustion, in their own unhealed pain. This quiet absence shapes a person with the pressing force of a sculptor's hands. It molds how they see their own reflection as someone easily looked past. It warps how they interpret the world, always assuming oversight. And it dictates how they build or meticulously avoid relationships decades later. We tell ourselves children are resilient, they adapt, but adaptation is not healing. Adaptation is survival. When a child learns to live without acknowledgement, they adapt by becoming smaller. They fold their needs neatly, like cherished letters they've been told are too trivial to send, and tuck them away. They convince themselves with the brutal logic of the abandoned that they simply don't matter as much. This adaptation gets them through childhood. Then it follows them into adulthood, into boardrooms and bedrooms, whispering the old lies. Don't be noticed. Don't be a problem. From a psychological standpoint, their baseline becomes a constant hum of anxiety. To the outside world, they look like a good, quiet kid. The harm of abuse is a visible scar. The harm of being ignored is an internal fracture, subtle, deep, and just as real. So what does this legacy look like decades later? A chronic, whispering low self-esteem. They hesitate to voice an opinion, convinced no one is interested. They may fear rejection so viscerally they preemptively abandon relationships. Or they may become masterful approval chasers, bending themselves into impossible shapes to please, because a frozen part of them is still holding up a crayon drawing, waiting for someone to finally look. Imagine being 8. You run home with a drawing you poured your heart into. Your parents' back is turned. You try at dinner, but the conversation flows around you like water around a stone. You don't cry. You just put the drawing away. In that moment, you learn your joy is not for sharing. Fast forward 30 years, that person gets a promotion. Their first impulse is to minimize it, to hide it. The ignored child has become the adult who expertly ignores themselves. Research gives shape to this pain.
Studies find emotional neglect in childhood is a powerful predictor of chronic, pervasive loneliness in adulthood, a loneliness that parties and marriages often cannot fill. It's crucial to understand, most parents who ignore their children aren't monsters. They're often drowning in stress, in their own trauma. But intention does not soften impact. To the child, the absence feels absolute. The ignored child develops tactics that look like superpowers. They become fiercely independent, learning to parent themselves. They become relentless high achievers, striving for a trophy that might finally act as a beacon to be seen. They become pleasers, swallowing their needs. But beneath these strengths runs exhaustion. The independent one struggles to trust. The achiever becomes a self-flagellating perfectionist. The pleaser loses their own voice. And perhaps the most devastating adaptation is the child who simply stops trying, who concludes, if I am invisible anyway, why bother? A profound barrier to healing is that the ignored child rarely has a clean story, no single dramatic event, just a vast landscape of silence, a museum of moments that should have mattered but didn't. That silence becomes a wall, making their pain feel illegitimate. They say nothing really bad happened, I wasn't hit, but the absence of something essential is its own trauma. It is the trauma of the void. Yet this is not a story that ends in doom. It pivots on a remarkable truth, the human capacity for healing. The brain is malleable, capable of rewiring, neuroplasticity. Every time the adult who was once an ignored child speaks up in a meeting and is heard, their brain registers a new data point: safety. Every time they set a small, trembling boundary that is respected, their nervous system learns trust. Every time they express a need and are met with care, they build a new neural pathway. Healing is forged in these small, brave, daily revolutions. It is in finally telling a friend, I need you to just listen. It is in the whispered admission to the mirror, my feelings matter. This journey is profoundly courageous because it asks someone to do the very thing their nervous system was wired to believe was dangerous, to take up space, to be seen. Speaking up can feel like risking annihilation, but doing it anyway, shaking but doing it, is how the self is repaired. A beautiful paradox often emerges. The ignored child frequently grows into the most deeply empathetic adult. Having been unseen, they develop a radar for the unseen in others. That hard-earned hypervigilance can, with healing, transform into a gift of profound connection. They become the ones who notice the faded smile, the quiet struggle. But the final step of healing is to turn that exquisite sensitivity inward, to listen to their own inner child with the same patience they give away to others. If you were that child, know this: your story, however quiet, carries power. By healing, you are not just mending your own fractures, you are breaking a chain of silence that may have lasted generations. Every ignored child who learns to see themselves becomes an adult who truly sees others. They become the parent who looks up from their phone, eyes bright with connection, the friend who asks the second real question, the partner who says, I see you. Healing is not erasing the past. It is building a new present with sturdier materials. It is becoming the attentive witness to your own life that you never had. It is giving yourself the gaze you deserved all along. You were shaped by the silence, but you are not defined by it. This is the story of how a wound of invisibility can, through courage and self-compassion, forge a gentle strength, the sacred refusal to make anyone else feel the way you once did. And in that choice, you discover the most liberating truth. You were never meant to live in the silence. You were always meant to be heard.